The Prophet ﷺ, is as the perfect human being, used to be happy and sometimes be sad. Sometimes he's pleased, sometimes he's angry, but he would never be angry for himself or for things that had happened to him. Rather, he gets angry only for the sake of Allah, for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. And when everything that wasn't good took place against his own self, he would pardon, he would forgive, and he would meet bad things with good deeds. He was patient and tolerant to the rudeness and ignorance of nomads and the likes. But whenever the boundaries of Sharia were interfered with, he would become angry. Sometimes he would punish. Sometimes he would reprimand. Sometimes he would admonish. And you can see clearly on his face when he hates something. And sometimes he would look the other way. Maybe his face would become red when angered. And we will mention today some of the scenarios and the incidents where the Prophet ﷺ admonished his companions for things that they had done. How was it? Was it to get even? Was it to vent his anger? Was it to degrade people? Never. It was to elevate them, to teach them, and to draw them closer to Allah Azza wa Jal through guiding them. The Prophet ﷺ did not frequently admonish and advise his companions, because when you sit with people who would only detect what's wrong with you, oh, you said this is wrong. You did this is wrong. You should have done that. You feel like you're being scrutinized, and people do not like this. As a matter of fact, this can backfire in so many cases. So be careful when to admonish, how to pick the right timing and the right environment and situation. Once the Prophet ﷺ admonished his beloved wife. So his love and compassion would never ever prevent him from saying the word of truth. The Prophet was always objective and was always talking for the sake of Allah. Even if he hated people, he would stand up to the truth. He would defend any form of oppression that is unjust. The Jews, whom we all hate, and we do not hate them because of the color of their eyes or the tone of their skin. Rather, we hate them for their ill deeds and evil ways and for their disbelief in Allah Azza wa Jal. This is what we were told about them in the Quran. Their treachery, their betrayal, their continuous lies and deceit. And a couple of nights ago, they desecrated the third holiest place on earth, and that is Al-Aqsa Masjid. They desecrated it under the protection of the police and the army, and no one is saying anything. And this shows you how weak and cowardice the Muslims are nowadays. They desecrated the masjid, they attacked the worshippers, business as usual. And even the Westerners who claim to be democratic and fighting for freedom did not say a thing, did not do a thing, and they will not do a thing because they are biased. They hate Islam and the Muslims. In Sweden, yesterday, the court overruled a ban on burning the Quran. The court goes this low for what? Only to humiliate the Muslims, which they have so many of in their country, in which they have a lot of commercial ties with in the Muslim world. But the Muslims, business as usual, burn the Quran, who cares? Burn the masjid, kill the Muslims, and nobody speaks out. This is why in Islam, we love for the sake of Allah and we hate for the sake of Allah. We have allegiances for the sake of Allah, and our enmity is also for the sake of Allah. So look at the fairness and justice of the Prophet ﷺ. The Jews, whom we all hate, used to come to the Prophet ﷺ and greet him with a twisted word. So instead of saying Assalamu alaikum, which means peace be upon you, they used to say Assalamu alaikum, which means death be upon you. See the difference? And the Prophet ﷺ figured that out. And whenever they came and said, Assalamu alaikum, death be upon you, he would say, Wa alaikum, and upon you. So Mother Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, could not hold herself back. And she shouted at them, saying, may the death and curse and the wrath of Allah be upon you. She bluntly said it. The Prophet said, alayhi salatu salam, reprimanding and admonishing Aisha, Mahya Aisha. Allah does not endorse or like being offensive, abusive, or using such profanity, such aggressiveness. Allah does not endorse this or like this. She said, didn't you hear what they said, O Prophet of Allah? He said, I heard. And I just replied to them, and upon you. Where Allah would not answer their supplication that death be upon me, but Allah would answer my supplication by saying, and upon you over them. Even when we hate people, we're fair and just. We do not endorse any form of wrongdoing or oppression that would be driven by our hatred to them. Also, the Prophet ﷺ admonished his poet. The Prophet had 3 poets, Hassan ibn Thabit, Ka'b ibn Malik, Abdullah ibn Rawaha. And Ka'b ibn Malik, on the battle of Tabuk, on the 9th year of Hijrah, was a bit reluctant and lazy in catching up with the Prophet ﷺ. So when the army set off, every day he would say, tomorrow I will go, I'll catch up with them in a while. And he kept on postponing it until it was too late. And that was considered to be a sort of desertion, as if he deserted the army. So when the Prophet came back, ﷺ, he admonished him and said to him, why didn't you join us? Didn't you have a right to accompany us? Didn't you have money enough? And he apologized by saying, I had no excuse, O Prophet of Allah. And you know what the story happened. The Prophet did not let it go. He admonished him. Also, sometimes he would admonish his companions over things that normal people would think that it's nothing. There was a black woman who used to clean and sweep the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, which is a great form of worship. But in our eyes, it's nothing. It's for the workers. It's for the janitor, not for us. So this black woman used to do that. And one day, it so happens, or one night, that she passed away. She died. So the companions, may Allah be pleased with them, did not think highly of her enough to go and wake up the Prophet ﷺ and notify him. So they took care of business, washed her, shrouded her, offered funeral prayer, and buried her. And when the Prophet ﷺ came to know, he admonished them. Why didn't you inform me? Why didn't you tell me? So the companions answered as if, she's nothing, O Prophet of Allah. She's not of great importance. And the Prophet ﷺ ordered them to show him her grave. So they went all to the cemetery, and he stood there with the companions behind him, and he offered funeral prayer for that woman whom we do not even know her name. And he said that these graves are filled with darkness, and Allah would fill it with light with my prayer upon them. The Prophet ﷺ admonished those closest to him. As stated earlier, his love and compassion did not prevent him from saying the word of truth. We all know the status of Usama ibn Zayd ibn Haritha. May Allah be pleased with him and with his father. You remember, we've mentioned this before, Zayd ibn Haritha was the adopted son of the Prophet ﷺ before adoption was demolished and prohibited. Usama was his son, and the Prophet loved both dearly, as a son and a grandson. On an expedition, Usama came back from, he was telling the Prophet ﷺ how they won. And there was a duel between him and one of the disbelievers. And the Prophet was anxious to hear about it, was very happy, until Usama said that I managed to corner this disbeliever, and when he felt that he's going to lose the duel, as protection, he said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. I bear witness there is no God worthy of being worshipped except Allah, which means that he's a Muslim now. So Usama said, this did not prevent me from putting my sword into his chest and killing him. Then the Prophet was shocked, alayhi salatu wassalam. And he looked sternly to Usama, admonishing him, saying, you killed him after he said, La ilaha illallah? He said, O Prophet of Allah, he just said it as a form of protection. He wanted to shield himself. He didn't mean it. We were just fighting. He's a disbeliever. He's an enemy of the religion. And the Prophet kept on saying, you killed him after he said, La ilaha illallah? What will you do with La ilaha illallah on the day of judgment? And he kept admonishing him by repeating it over and over and over until Usama said to himself, I wish I only became Muslim that day so that it would have erased this incident from my records. And this admonishment benefited Usama greatly years later when this ruffle and dispute took place between the companions' factions and they had to fight with one another. Usama was neither with any of the parties. He wasn't there. He did not fight. He refrained from participating in such a fight. Not only that, Usama did something similar again, and he was admonished again. A woman from the tribe of Makhzum, a dignitary, a highly reputable tribe, she used to steal things from people and never return them back, like borrowing utensils and never giving it back, saying that it's mine. So when they complained to the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet ruled that she has to face the punishment for stealing things, and that is to cut her hand off. So the people of the woman went to Usama because they know that he's close and beloved to the Prophet ﷺ, complained and asked him to intercede. So Usama, a young boy, went to the Prophet and said, "O Prophet of Allah, if you can have some leniency on the woman, her family came to me." And the Prophet ﷺ was outraged, saying to Usama, "Do you intercede in one of Allah's prescribed punishment? Do you intercede?" Then he made a public speech to teach the people the gravity of such an act. And he praised Allah Azza wa Jal, and he offered salutation upon the Prophet and then said to the people, "Beware, those before you were destroyed and annihilated when their dignitaries stole and they let them go. While when the poor stole, they used to chop their hands. So it must be known to all. There's no intercession in the prescribed punishment once it's finalized." And this is to indicate the importance of prescribed punishment for the security and the safety of the community. Of course, above all, because it's the law of Allah, it's the Sharia. But compare apple to apple. Compare the countries that implement Sharia laws with the countries that implement man-made laws, where you have prisons filled unjustly or justly with murderers, with robbers and thieves, with rapists, and they don't have places to put them in anymore. And it's costing the government a lot. While in Muslim countries where prescribed punishment are implemented, you don't find this. It's safe with the grace of Allah Azza wa Jal, because people know what the punishment is, and the punishment is divine and from Allah. The Prophet ﷺ sometimes reprimanded his companions over things that we may not pay attention to. The Prophet ﷺ was once in the masjid when a convoy came and they started speaking to the Prophet ﷺ, and he found this smell that he prohibited the Muslims from entering the masjid when eating such plants, onions, garlics, and the likes that have a offensive odor. So the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, "Hadn't I prohibited you from eating from this tree and coming to the masjid?" Be aware that the angels are offended from what the humans are offended of or offended from. So nowadays in Ramadan, we go to iftar and then go to Maghrib prayer, or come and attend Isha prayer and Taraweeh. And subhanallah, you are surrounded by people that offend you and the angels in the masjid and the other worshippers with the amount of garlic and onion that comes out with their breath. Now, we don't say it's haram to eat. Nobody said that it is haram to eat it, but it's haram to attend the masjid. And due to the fact that people want the reward of attending congregational prayer and taraweeh, they overlook the prohibition and they still attend the masjid with this offensive odor that is repulsive, that is offending the angels and the worshippers, and they are sinful for that. The Prophet ﷺ also reprimanded Mu'adh ibn Jabal, his great companion, when he used to prolong Isha prayer, which was difficult for the worshippers behind him. In an incident, he came to lead them in Isha, and he started reading with Surah Al-Baqarah. One of the companions had so many things to do and so many errands, and that was taking too much time, so he completed Isha on his own and left to attend his things. People told Mu'adh. Mu'adh said that this guy is a hypocrite. Same people went to the guy and said to him, Mu'adh is accusing you of hypocrisy. He went to the Prophet and complained, alayhi salatu wasalam. The Prophet was angry and he admonished Mu'adh. أَفَتَّانٌ أَنْتَ يَا Mu'adh? Are you trying to repel people away from Islam, from prayers? When any one of you leads prayer, he should acknowledge that behind him there are those who are old, there are those who are sick, there are those who have errands to accomplish. So make it short and easy. And finally, the Prophet ﷺ admonished his own cousin, his own son-in-law, Ali, may Allah be pleased with him. Once he visited his daughter's house, Fatima, and her husband Ali, and when they permitted him to enter, he found them lying in bed, and it was nighttime. He said, why don't you pray? Why aren't you praying night prayer? Immediately Ali, may Allah be pleased with him, replied and said, O Prophet of Allah, our souls are in the hands of Allah. Whenever He wants to set them free for us to wake up, we will wake up and pray. But other than that, we don't have any control. We're asleep. The Prophet did not reply, alayhi salam. He gave his back and went out, striking his thigh and saying, وَكَانَ الْإِنسَانُ أَكْثَرَ شَيْءٍ جَدَلًا. But man has ever been most of anything prone to dispute, argument, which means that the Prophet ﷺ did not like the answer of Ali. That was quick. And instead of saying, yes, inshallah, we will do that, O Prophet of Allah, he gave a justification that was not adequate to the Prophet ﷺ, and this is why he said this ayah and left, admonishing Ali, who understood and the message and learned the lesson.